And so, it begins. Dark were the skies, and chill was the wind, as the land was scoloured in a veil of malice. Across the hill did ride the dread army of the night, cloaked in mist and fog, prepared to rain down death and destruction upon the land. And the people did cry out for a saviour, a noble soul to save them from their impending demise. Just as it seemed all was lost, in strode a mighty hero, clad in shivering metal from head to toe. Wielding a terrible broadsword, he did cleave his foes in two,
smashing their ranks asunder with righteous fury. And when the day was done and the enemy strewn across the fields in pieces, the people did turn to the warrior and say, "We shall name this day in your honour, speak unto us your wisdom." The warrior said one word that day:
epic!
One man, one Murloc, one giant angry badger. This is Blue Plz. It begins now.
Yes, indeed, folks. Welcome to Blue Plz on WoW Radio with myself, TotalBiscuit. I felt we had to kind of speed things up a bit because I was running out of pre-show, and I want to just stick in a few more songs, so there you go. What have we got coming up for you on the show today? Well, first I can tell you the date, which is the 24th of March, 2009. It is 8 p.m. GMT. In other times, it is times that I do not care about. GMT is the true time, the rest are fakers, false prophet times. Should be ignored and perhaps tied to a stake and burned for heresy. Heresy! Delicious heresy. What do we got coming up for you in the show today? Well. Oh, well. It is very rare that I get so wound up, so angry, so furious, so righteously indignatious, if that's a real word. I don't care. I'm not self-righteous and sanctimonious today. Oh yeah, all of those other adjectives and stuff. Blizzard has done something which annoys me. It doesn't just such annoy me, it plays to a centre of my brain that contains the kind of rage that could only be summoned via satanic rituals and days of preparation, perhaps the sacrifice of 1,000 virgins, and the summoning of an honourable pig demon. Or perhaps a dishonourable pig demon. Yes, let's go with dishonourable. A dishonourable pig demon summoned from the very nethers of hell itself. That goes some way to describing how annoyed I am at a specific change, and I will be telling you about that a little bit later on in the show. Also, Ghostcrawler promised me a pony. He didn't give me the pony. That makes me mad! We're talking about Ghostcrawler promising ponies to people a little bit later on in the show, and announcement that Arcanist Belt, our level 60 raiding content project thingy, the guild on Anachronos EU, has killed a Ragnaros. Yes, indeed. So we're going to be doing a retrospective on Molten Core, or Molten Boar, identifying, was there anything actually good about that instance, and probably coming to the conclusion that no, there was not. However, if you wish to be involved in Arcanist Belt, we have opened up some recruiting again. Yes, we have. We've killed a rag, folks. We're going on to interesting content now. Oh, yes. If you want to join in the fun, you can either transfer an existing 60, or you can roll up a new one, and we recommend the Recruit a Friend program. Check out arcanistbelt.com. Yes, indeed, we have many spots available for certain classes. And those of you who have signed up to the guild and are part of the guild and haven't been showing up to raids recently, show up! You're missing out on epics and awesome progression. You guys fail. Saturday, we've got a raid. Go show up to it. Got some optionals on Wednesday and Thursday. Do it. Do it now! Or on Saturday, which is probably more appropriate. Don't do it now, there won't be anyone on. Yes, indeed. Of course, we cap off the show with the illusion of choice. Yes, I did say the illusion of choice! Dangerous. Health and safety hazard, that dropping. The illusion of choice will come out later. It gives you the opportunity to submit the last topic for the show. Email themurloc@gmail.com. That is themurloc@gmail.com. If you would like to submit a potential topic for the last 15 minutes of this show. Yes, indeed. Now, it is time for a segment that, quite frankly, handily fills in approximately 12 minutes of the episode and takes virtually no effort from myself. It's...
That sounds like it's mail time. Here's the mail.
It never fails.
It makes me want to wag my tail. When it comes,
I want to wail.
Oh, yeah. Absolutely. It's mail time. Right, how about an interesting email in here from Totally Twink. That is a terrible name. He's planning on getting a name change. He actually realizes how bad a name that is, but it's like, did you accidentally just get to 80 with that? Did you not notice up until level 80? It's like, I appear to have a stupid name. Oh, it's alright, just level up to 80. Oh, I have a stupid name! Right! Now I get it. Now I can get it changed. He's from Undermine US. Go mock him. Go send him, like, something horrible in the mail. Some rotting meat. He says this, Hey TB, I haven't really been on WoW for a while, since I'm not really all that interested in the current endgame content, and let's face it, who can blame him? But I was going through YouTube, and I found a video on Ulduar that showed me the graphical artwork of Yogg-Saron, his lair, his tentacles, his brain, and it kind of reminded me of Cthulhu, and I was wondering if you know anything about it, since you've basically been raving about Ulduar for a while. If they are really doing this, do you think that they're basically bringing back Cthulhu? And also, if Ulduar is really what you're talking about, are you going to be leaving Arcanist's belt for it? Well, I'm not entirely sure why people are so surprised that he's got the whole tentacles, brain, lair thing going on. I mean, I don't know much about the lore, but last I checked, Yogg-Saron was an old god and so was Cthulhu, so there's going to be some similarities there. And fighting gods is, kind of fun. As regards to the actual encounter, I know basically nothing about it. I've been deliberately avoiding reading about these encounters whenever possible. I know stuff like what the Flame Leviathan does, and Freya and a couple of other encounters, but I'm deliberately trying to avoid it. Why? Because I'd actually like to enjoy the content as a challenge and not get as many advantages as humanly possible before doing that, which is the very reason I haven't been playing on the PTR. It's rather important to me that I ensure that my personal enjoyment of the game is going to be high over the next couple of months. Otherwise, I won't be doing Blue Plz anymore. I'll be doing Isk Plz, like for EVE Online or something. Something that will actually keep me going for a reasonable length of time. If WoW can't fill that earth, then don't expect this show to continue to exist. I mean, that's just how it goes. So, I'm certainly hoping that Ulduar will provide. I don't wish any failure upon Blizzard, absolutely not. Self-destructive. Now, as regards to Arcanist's belt, the thing you've got to realise about Arcanist's belt, and this is something I've had to explain to so many people on the forums, is that the reason people are forming guilds like Arcanist's belt and doing this kind of novelty content, going back to what they would... back to their roots, as it were, doing the old content, is because there's not enough new content. And I'm surprised that people don't get this, like, oh, well, this isn't fun, oh, the new content's so much better. Well, it really isn't. I mean, the new content is the old content. Nax is old content. How can you mock the old content when the vast majority of the new content is the same as the old content, but declawed? What you've now got, you've got Malagos, which is relatively challenging. You've got Sarth, which is, of course, not challenging unless you do it in 3 Drakes mode. I mean, Sarth is a good fight, don't get me wrong, but it is only still one fight. And VOA, which is just an insult to raiding in general. So, it's pretty obvious why people are going back to the old stuff. And TBC had a bunch of really good instances, particularly after they fixed them. I mean, if you look at them, it's like Karazhan, pretty good instance, too much trash. Zoloman, very well-designed instance. Very challenging bosses, very good there. In my opinion, the peak of 10-mans. Really. I'd like to see them beat that. I'd like to see them top that in a full-size 10-man instance. Because, in my opinion, Zoloman is just absolutely stellar in every respect. Serpentine Cavern, very good. Very good instance. Some very good bosses in there, particularly Vash. Vash, a very entertaining encounter. Of course, not a bad instance. I mean, half of the bosses kind of sucked, but Allah was a good fight, and so was Kael'thas. Kael'thas, very inventive, very challenging. And then you go on to Black Temple, which was generally considered to be a very good instance. Mount Hyjal, which was considered to be at least interesting, particularly from a lore perspective, and Archimonde being an exceptionally good encounter. The rest of them not so much. And then, of course, Sunwell Plateau, which most people would consider to be, and do currently consider to be, the peak of 25-man raiding. Indeed, Blizzard having said they're never going to make something that challenging again, which is somewhat disappointing, to say the least. So it's like, you wonder why people want to go back to this old content. A lot of them haven't done it, particularly old world stuff. A lot more people ended up doing the TBC stuff, particularly after they nerfed it. But the old world stuff, no way. I mean, you'd be surprised, like, about half of our guild who went and killed Ragnaros on Saturday had never seen him. I mean, that just boggles the mind. And if they had seen him, they certainly hadn't seen him level appropriate. No, they'd seen him at level 80 where 5 people can kill him, and they just laugh at him. Oh no. No. Not anymore. He's intimidating, particularly to a level 60. It's like, well, I've only got 4k hit points, so you can do this thing which hits me for like 3k, and then I might land the lava and die. That's pretty intimidating. He was intimidating back in the day. The fact that he's Xbox huge tends to help. But yeah, there won't be a need for guilds like Arcanist Belt and stuff like that if they bring out enough good, interesting content to keep people raiding. People want to raid, but they can't, because there isn't enough content. I want to be raiding all week. I can't raid all week. For God's sake, we clear everything in 4 hours. The only thing that we're actually doing to try and make progress right now, and this is just for the sake of having something to do, is attempts on SAR 3D 10-man, which is rock friggin' hard. That's fine, but in the end of the day, we're not a 10-man guild, and we never wanted to be. Would have been nice to have some challenging 25-man content. But, I can't really complain. At least there's something I can do, I must say. But I don't see why people are just so confused as to why people want to do the old raid content at level appropriate. That's why. That is why they're doing it. They're just trying to find anything to keep them playing the game. As opposed to simply being, actually, no, there's, I'm afraid, nothing left to entertain us as raiders at all, so we're just going to stop. That's not very good, is it? I wouldn't want to do that. Now, got an interesting email here. It's from Antoinette, the Immortal. He's a level 80 Night Elf Druid from OTM on Blackflight US, and he says this. Conquering RNG, making a case for the Immortal. Hey there, sorry for the wall of text, I just wanted to preface this. Well, we don't need the compliments, so let's go for this. He says, I do, however, have to disagree with your opinion with the Immortal, saying that it is too RNG based. It all starts with the common adage, life isn't fair. No matter how hard Blizzard tries, RNG in the game will always play more of a role than people would like. From server lag, ISP lag, emergencies at home. The same thing is mirrored in life. Not everyone is born with the same opportunities. Some are born with a silver spoon in the mouth, while others are born into destitution. But determination can conquer the hand that life has dealt you through hard work and perseverance. I feel the Immortal / Undying is the epitome of a great guild achievement, and the best measure of a guild in this wimpy content. It requires tight, not flawless, play over a whole lockout as a guild. If you do happen to lose it to RNG beyond your control, you should be able to give it another go. If your raid is good enough as a whole, each of the 25 players, I see it being highly unlikely that you will not have Immortal after 4 weeks of tight play. Point is, the good guilds will get this achievement if they persist at it. Then he gives a bunch of kind of obvious tips, which I don't really need to read. I understand where you're coming from here, really. In an ideal world, I would think the Immortal would be a stellar achievement, really. The problem is, particularly, to be honest, the Immortal would have been better before Wrath came out. The problem simply comes down to this. Wrath service stability has gone down the toilet. Seriously. Since launch. And it's mostly due to Wintergrasp. They've admitted that, and yet they haven't fixed it. Now, in my opinion, a novelty PvP arena, which is effectively what it is, don't tell me there's a challenge to it. It's ridiculous. You just face roll the entire encounter. For God's sake, most people don't even realise that you can get into the sides of the siege vehicles and DPS from them. I'm driving around a siege vehicle, it's like, hey, get in, DPS. No, they don't do it. Or I'm trying to get in a siege vehicle, they won't stop moving. I say, hey, stop, I'll help you DPS. They won't do it. It's the same with the blinking Strand of the Ancients. Like saying, oh, you guys, you want to win? Put some range DPS in those vehicles. No, they don't do it. They just face roll into it. And they hope that they win and then complain when they don't. It's not difficult. But to be honest, if I had to sacrifice Wintergrasp, which is relatively fun, don't get me wrong, for stable servers, then in a heartbeat I would say, for God's sake, kill Wintergrasp. Better yet, fix the servers. It's been how many months now, and we've had the same problems. I get so many emails in, you would not believe, every week, by people saying, you know what, we were going to get the Immortal, but we had Thaddeus, which is a lagging account to begin with. It's been a lagging account for 3.5 years, for God's sake. The first time Thaddeus was brought in, it caused server lag. The mechanics of the fight break the servers, and yet they still have not been fixed. Now combine that with the fact that Wintergrasp is balking the servers up, and you've got an essence for fail pie. It's horrible. And I've seen this happen. And people say, oh, well, there's ways and means around it, but there really isn't. Because a lot of the time, you don't realise someone's DC'd until it's too late. If they're not speaking on vent, and they're not obviously de-seed in-game, which is entirely possible, then for God's sake, how do you work around that? It's incredibly hard. Nigh on impossible. And in my opinion, the measure of a guild's ability to do content at the moment is Sarth 3D. Sarth 3D 25-man and Sarth 3D 10-man. And yeah, we're working towards Sarth 3D 10-man, because that's an encounter where no mistakes can happen. I've seen it. One mistake and the entire thing collapses. Literally. I have never seen anything that intense since the way Archimon used to work. One mistake, one death. This isn't even just one death. This is one false step. And that's great. I like that. It's just a shame there's not an instance full of that kind of stuff. But no, the Immortal just causes so much drama that I don't think it's worth having. They've changed it in Old Wars, you may have noticed. They've now changed it so that you basically have to kill all the bosses without dying, but you don't have to do it in the same reset. So you can kind of gradually build it up. Now, in some respects, I find that rather unfortunate, because I don't think that's actually a measure of skill at all. Or the ability to raid. Not dying, well, you should be dying anyway. Yes, I understand that not dying through an entire run is a big deal and a huge achievement. The problem is when it should have happened, by all rights it should have happened, and you get screwed over by the server. And that happens so much, and it happens way more than you might think, particularly when dealing with Thaddeus. Which is, again, a laggy encounter, and has been for 3.5 years. God, if you lived with Kiki Jiki when he was doing Thaddeus, good lord, the howls, the screams, the rage. You could feel it through the floorboards, my god. And yet, it still hasn't been fixed. No, I find that somewhat suspect. You're listening to Blue Plz here on WoW Radio with myself, TotalBiscuit, and I'll be right back after this. Enjoy. You're listening to the podcast and archive of Blue Plz. Music was removed due to copyright concerns. If you'd like to hear the music, tune in live on Fridays at 8 p.m. British Standard Time. That is 3 p.m. EST on WCRadio.com. Yes, indeed, folks, you tune in to Blue Plz here on WoW Radio with myself, TotalBiscuit. If you just tuned in, then you've missed the first 15 minutes of the show. And a small portion of my upcoming rage will be directed at you. However, it's very difficult to go into this topic without the urge to basically say something along the lines of this. You! Seriously. It's very difficult. I'm going to attempt to stay away from the harsh language in an effort to properly prove my point. We received some information a few days ago regarding a new World of Warcraft user interface add-on development policy. Now, if you are in the IRC chat, you will be able to get a link to this policy. So I suggest that you head to irc.mmoirc.com, # WoW Radio. Alternatively, click the chat button at the top of the screen on wcradio.com to take us into our Java room. If you head into there, you should be able to get a link to that. Our IRC rep will provide. Now, this add-on policy. Quote, with the continuing popularity of World of Warcraft user interface add-ons created by the community of players, Blizzard Entertainment has formalized design and distribution guidelines for add-ons. These guidelines have been put in place to ensure the integrity of World of Warcraft and to help promote an enjoyable gaming environment for all of our players. Failure to abide by them may result in measures up to and including taking formal legal action. Interesting. Formal legal action, eh, Blizzard? Because last time I checked, you didn't own the code with which you create World of Warcraft user add-ons, correct? No? No, you don't. Because that code is LUA 5.1, which is, of course, licensed under an MIT license. In fact, you do not own the rights to LUA 5.1 at all. So it seems to me that the idea of taking formal legal action is a little bit suspect, but we'll play along for the moment. So let's have a look at these. Add-ons must be free of charge. Oh. All add-ons must be distributed free of charge. Developers may not create premium versions of add-ons with additional for-pay features, charge money to download an add-on, charge for services related to an add-on, or otherwise require some form of monetary compensation to download or access an add-on. Right, well, let's just make a start on this, shall we? As this is the one that a lot of people are going to disagree on. Now, some will argue, let's put forward the pros and the... Some will argue that since it is based on World of Warcraft, and the add-on is coded for World of Warcraft, that Blizzard has the right to say, no, you may not do this. Now, let's take an example of that if that actually happened in the real world, instead of Blizzard's distorted reality of what intellectual property law actually involves. How many of you own an iPod? Okay, fair enough. How many of you own some kind of accessory for that iPod? Okay, quite a few of you. How many of you own an accessory that was not created by Apple? Oh, lots of you. Okay, so Apple turns around and says, sorry guys, no, we're not going to allow any of you to create any add-ons for this whatsoever, for the iPod, nothing whatsoever, because we don't want you to. And we think the iPod is our intellectual property, as is everything associated or surrounded or within 100 miles of it. Now, how would you react to that? Because personally, I would react rather badly to it. How many of you own third-party phone chargers, for instance? How many of you use compatible ink cartridges? Quite a few of you, I'd imagine. There was a few recent lawsuits, actually, by some larger printer ink companies against some of the smaller firms, and they basically forced the smaller firms to stop selling under the threat of massive weight of lawsuits, despite the fact that many lawyers did state that the smaller firms would have had a very strong case had they gone into and got involved in the actual legal proceedings, but of course they could not afford to do so. Now, why did they force these compatible ink cartridges out of the market? Well, the simple answer is this. They couldn't gouge people on their ink cartridges if there were proper, cheaper, fairly priced alternatives. Now, it seems to me that, and let's face it, I wrote a dissertation on this, that intellectual property law has been used very frequently over the last decade in particular to bash down innovation and batter down competition. It has been used as a weapon as opposed to being used as a shield, which it was reasonably intended to do. That was its original purpose, protect the creators, not be used by the creators to abuse and destroy other creators. Now, let's have a look at this. Add-on code must be completely visible. Right, well, okay, I can go with that. Add-ons must not negatively impact World of Warcraft realms or other players. Yeah, I can go with that. Add-ons may not include advertising. Oh, interesting. Okay. Now here's the one that I really have a problem with. Add-ons may not solicit donations. Add-ons may not include requests for donations. We recognise the immense amount of effort and resources that go into developing an add-on. However, such requests should be limited to the add-on website or distribution site and should not appear in the game. What? Are you mad? I mean, is there something physically wrong with your brains? And I'm talking collectively here, not just one person. Because last I checked, the vast majority of people do not go to the add-on maker's website to download the add-on. Most stuff comes through Curse, and the Curse downloader avoids you having to go to the website altogether in order to get updates for the add-on, so the vast majority of people will never see the donation request. It's madness. Now, let's have a look at this from a moral standpoint, because last I checked, if I were to work on something, I were to spend my time making something in a language which is openly licensed and not owned by Blizzard, then last I checked, I own that product, and I can do with it what I see fit. Including soliciting donations, which is a perfectly valid way of doing things. We solicit donations all the time. Why? Because you know what? We provide a lot of free content. And we provide a lot of man-hours that are put into and devoted to developing this content and putting this content out on the air. So we solicit donations. Now, in our case, it's okay to do it on our website and on our podcast because we have sole control of that. But then again, if our podcasts and interfaces somehow relied on World of Warcraft and we were forbidden from doing that, we get shut down. We wouldn't be able to afford to continue to run. That's the same with advertising. Now, are you seriously telling me that these add-on creators do not deserve the right? They don't deserve the right to solicit donations? Voluntary donations. Put a little thing in that says, hey, if you like this, feel free to donate. Is that what you're telling me? You are telling me that failure to abide by that term will result in measures up to and including taking formal legal action? Are you absolutely out of your frigging minds? Because I can't think of any other way to explain that. What? I mean, slap in the face doesn't even cover it. Talk about kick in the stomach. breaking of the nose, kicking while they're down and leaving them bleeding in the dirt. Try that. Try that when you say to the add-on developers who fixed your broken UI from the start of the game, who continue to make your game way more usable and way more functional, and whose ideas you steal on a monthly basis with no accreditation and no compensation and add them to the game. Now you're telling me that these people do not deserve support and do not deserve, in their own modifications that they have created, that they have spent the time to make, they do not deserve to put a little link that says, if you like it, donate? I'm at a loss for words for the utter corporate greed and spitefulness of that particular move. Let me put it this way, and this is going out to the naysayers, because there's been a few people who have said, oh well, one, add-ons aren't required to play, so it doesn't matter. Well, okay, fine. Go into game right now and disable all your add-ons. Go on, off you go. If you think that, go into game right now and disable all your add-ons. Now play for a week, and tell me that the game is not decidedly more inconvenient. You see, I played at launch. I'm not one of the scrubs who picked it up at TBC or Wrath. I played at launch, and I remember how bad the UI was. I remember raiding with no mods. I remember what that was like. It was a disgrace. It was horrendous. It was unplayably bad. Thankfully, mods came along and sorted it out. Add-ons came and sorted it out. You weren't even able to have extra bars on launch, for God's sake. That's something they had to put in later. They didn't think about that, did they? No, they didn't. Now, the other complaint by the naysayers is they should just create the mods for the love of creating mods and the love of the game. Newsflash, game ain't that good. The game does not justify in any respect sinking hundreds upon hundreds of hours into a thankless job. No, it doesn't. You pay for the privilege of playing this game. The service provider is not the mod creator. The service provider is Blizzard. They are the ones who have to give to us, not the other way around. It's like Blizzard suddenly saying, sorry WoW Radio, you're not able to advertise anymore because doing it for the love of it should be enough. It isn't. It is not enough whatsoever. If people create, they have the right to demand recompense, compensation, remuneration for their work. They can ask for it politely. And if you don't like it, you as the consumer have one right. Vote with your feet and don't use it. I've seen the complaints about Carbonite and all of that stuff. It's like, oh, they demand money. Oh, they've got paid versions. The complaint, say, about the new Curse client. Oh, it's a premium Curse client. Oh, how dare they charge? How dare they charge? Because it's their site, their bandwidth, and their code. They can charge whatever they damn well please. It's their service, and so are add-ons. It doesn't matter if they run within WoW. It's a service that Blizzard did not provide in the first place. It's code that Blizzard did not provide in the first place, and that code does not belong to Blizzard. Not in the slightest. Now, if you think they should just be doing it for the good of everyone, then I'm sorry, but you're leaning towards communism there, and that doesn't work in reality. Innovation is spurred on by capitalism. That's how it works. It is not spurred on by the glory and good of your fellow man. I'm sorry, but people ain't that far evolved yet. Maybe in the 23rd century, when we're flying about on ships in the USS Enterprise, then maybe, just maybe at that point, we will have got to that stage of enlightenment. But we have not. And innovation is spurred on by the ability to better oneself by getting monies. Time spent equals recompense. Now, there is a list that I have received of add-on devs that are going to be stopping developing as a result of this. Quest Helper, dead. It's dead. As of the 20th of March 2009, part of the changelog on Quest Helper, disable donation request. Bad news, guys. Everyone, Quest Helper is dead. Why? Because the guy who made Quest Helper relied on Quest Helper for some of his income. That was part of his job. And now he can't make income from his own work anymore? Bollocks, to be quite honest. Carbonite Quest, same deal. If you don't like to use the paid version of Carbonite Quest, then don't bloody use it. You don't have to. It is your right as a consumer to say no. But to suggest, to insinuate, to even have the merest glimmering thought that somebody should not receive their just desserts, their comeuppance, and indeed compensation for their time spent is ludicrous. It is insanity. It is childish. It is unrealistic. It is delusional. It is colossally arrogant on the part of Blizzard to think that they can dictate this kind of thing. I would love to see them go after an add-on developer. I would love to see it. Take an add-on developer to court. See what that does to your PR. Major multinational corporation goes after guy in his bedroom for making something which made the game better. Yeah, that'll go down well. If that happens, the first person to lose their subscription will be me. Because let me tell you this. If you don't stand up to companies like this, they will walk all over you. Blizzard is no different. Not anymore. You might have thought at some point that they were, but they never really were. And they're certainly not now. Not after merging with Activision. If you do not stand up and say enough is enough, then nothing's going to get done. You are going to get walked all over. I mean, right now, I'm staring at the World of Warcraft website with a massive T-Mobile ad on it. I go on the forums, which I pay a subscription to access and post upon. That is part of my subscription. Yes, it's a privilege, but I'm looking at that massive ads for all sorts of things that are not Blizzard. Third-party advertising, insecure, not controlled by Blizzard. It's a madness. Where does it end? What about in-game advertising? Let's see that. It does make me wonder whether or not, we don't want any advertising in-game because we're planning on putting it in WoW. It's a disgrace. It is absolutely disgusting. And let me say this. If you don't think you care, well, think about this little old adage that I have adapted for the purposes of WoW. First, they came for the machinimators. But I did not speak out, because I was not a machinimator. Then they came for the podcasters. But again, I did not speak out, because I was not a podcaster. Then they came for the add-on developers. But I did not speak out, because I was not an add-on developer. And then they came for me. And there was no one left to speak on my behalf. Enough is enough. The line must be drawn here. You listen to TotalBiscuit here on Blue Plz on WoW Radio. I'll be right back after this. Enjoy. You're listening to the podcast and archive of Blue Plz. Music was removed due to copyright concerns. If you'd like to hear the music, tune in live on Fridays at 8 p.m. British Standard Time. That is 3 p.m. EST on WCRadio.com. Yes, indeed, folks, you're tuning in to Blue Plz here on WoW Radio with myself, TotalBiscuit, and we have more topics to discuss, so let's get right on with it. I was intrigued, I was interested, I must say, on a particular topic, which I noticed on the forums. Unfortunately, it seems to have vanished. However, thanks to the internet, it's findable, hidden, somewhere in the mists. And here it is. If you're in our RSC channel, you'll be able to see this. And it was posted by a mage called Quandari, which I assume is Quandary, but not spelt correctly, which really doesn't give things a particularly good start. And they say this. Promises, promises. What we were promised. Help for fire in PvP. Help for frost in PvE. What we got? Nerf to mages of every type. This is like a song. Let's try and make it into some kind of poetry, shall we? Nerf to mages of every type by giving our crit debuff to other classes, then cutting it in half. Crappy RNG disarm with a low proc chance that requires mage getting hit to activate. This for a class that makes its living in PvP by avoiding getting hit. Impact reworked in a way that is on balance a pretty hefty nerf. replenishment on a crappy talent that nobody will ever use, because Frost is still horrible for PvE. Reworked PvE only Ice Lance, glyph that is completely useless, because casting Ice Lance in PvE is still a loss of DPS. Thanks a lot. Oh, I almost forgot. Instead of fixing the abysmal programming of the mirror image spell, or giving me direct control of it, Blizz, once again, takes the easy way out, and simply removes functionality. Stunning. Isn't that so much better when you read it that way? Because otherwise, it would be a colossal pile of bollocks! Blizz promised me this! Blizz promised me that! They told me to do this for me! But didn't give me a time frame, or specifically state how they were going to do it, but they promised me! They promised. And of course, the reply from Ghostcrawler was suitably epic. Yes! I did just say epic! Ghostcrawler promised me a pony. And the forums exploded. Oh yeah, the drama. The worst possible thing you can do when dealing with the idiots that infest, and I do say infest in perhaps the most derogatory possible way. I mean, I'm talking the creatures that inhabit the underbelly of a rotting ship. The rats. The crabs. Not the nice kind of crabs either. The bilge. Those kind of people. The seedy underbelly of World of Warcraft. They're the kind of people that inhabit the forums. Because Lord knows, the worst thing you can do when involving those kind of people is to confront them with reality. Because they all have their own separate realities, hidden away in a lovely little bubble. Yes. And that bubble can be very easily popped. It's very fragile, despite how willfully ignorant these people can be. And they're very good at it, don't get me wrong. They are well practiced at simply ignoring everything that is right, proper, and common sense, and simply pursuing their own moron, ditto-headed agenda. You'll find people like this in every walks in life. Most of them can be found in the Republican Party. But Lord, don't confront these people with reality. Especially if you're in a position of authority. Oh, you don't want to do that. No. Especially then. Because what's going to happen is Q, and Q again. And I don't mean the British style of queuing, I mean crying, bawling. Crying a river, drowning in said river, being washed up on the shore of some beach in front of a bunch of kids who are scarred for the rest of their lives. That kind of QQ. The worst kind of QQ. Now, why did the forums explode? Well, I suppose you could perhaps argue that a customer service representative gave a sarky remark to a customer. Yeah, and of course the old adage is the customer is always right. And anyone who's ever worked in retail will be of course aware that that is complete and total bollocks. The customer is rarely ever right, is mostly wrong, and usually communicates in a manner which is irrational and driven by their own personal emotions and beliefs of what the particular situation should be, as opposed to what the particular situation actually is. It's rather ridiculous. Rather disgusting, and if you've ever worked in it, sadly, par the course. Now, he ended up having to leave this thread. He says, we want to make these discussions a place for serious discussion. A lot of that has to do with the way you communicate. Any thread that starts off or has a healthy dose of Blizzard doesn't get my class and hates me and breaks promises isn't getting us there. Do not QQ, do not insult the developers or other players, do not demand changes, do not make threats. If you think someone is wrong, explain why. If you think something isn't working, explain why. If you aren't sure how to communicate the way you want to communicate, then just read and don't post. I probably won't come back to this thread, so I would not post here with the intention that I see it. Healthy dose of reality there. based, of course, on the forum rules, which most people tend to ignore, myself included, because I think the forum rules are somewhat draconian in place, although I've got rather good at dodging them lately. Now, this thread got deleted. I would imagine that this was Ghostcrawler having his Xeric moment. And we all remember what happened to Xeric. Xeric threw down a healthy dose of reality and ended up losing his job. Now, as to whether or not that was directly related to that, we can't really prove it, but it's likely, let's face it. You can't say that to your customer base, no matter how stupid they are. And you know what? I wish they would. I wish they'd say this kind of thing more often. Because what's going to drive people away from this game is the stupidity of the community. If you lose a couple of QQers whose pitty little, horrible, bitty, fragile feelings got hurt by someone delivering the truth face first, then I'm okay with that. If you lose those people, I'm alright with that. That's a benefit. WoW now has a reputation of being full of idiots, and that reputation is not undeserved. Not by any stretch of the imagination. You know what? That puts off players. WoW is mocked by every other gaming community. Seriously. Every other gaming community. Every game. I've played a variety of different MMOs as well as other games, and mentioning that you play WoW in any of those games is the equivalent of hanging a noose around your neck, covering yourself in tar and feathers, and saying, "Good Lord, hang me now. I robbed the village store. You should cut off my hands. Subject me to the horrible kind of punishment. As I did all of these things." It's a crime, literally. It's like a crime against gaming humanity to admit that you play WoW, because you are associated with these dolts, these dinguses, these wastes of breath that do not deserve the time of day. They do not deserve protection. They do not deserve pandering to. They should be purged with fire and pitchforks. Have a good old-fashioned village riot, peasant revolt, to get rid of these idiots. And yes, it is okay to confront them with reality. It is for their own good. You are doing them a service. Now, the CM's job, as far as I see it, is to try and keep the forums healthy. Now, this is something I've said on my blog, if you want to check it out, blueplz.blogspot.com. I wrote a 5,000-word project on how not to get trolled on the WoW forums. One of the things I said, which I must reiterate now, is that you get trolled because you post crap. And that the forums that don't have a lot of trolling on them are the forums that have the strictest rules and the harshest penalties if you break them. And that is not only enforced by the people who run the site, but the community that is protective of that forum. If you post crap on the Something Awful forum, you will get flamed in manners that you could never have possibly imagined. Seriously. It will burn you into the middle of next week through your monitor. You will be covered in it. You will have to go to intensive care to deal with these kind of burns. Do the mods stop it? No, they encourage it. It's self-policing of the forums. The rules are clear. If you don't read them, you deserve everything you get, quite literally. You don't have to protect these people. I mean, bear in mind, people pay to post on the SA forums as well. Do you think they protect them just because they pay? No, they don't. They oust them when necessary. Why? Because they want a good forum. And they want people to stick around on their forums, and it's not going to happen if the forum's full of morons. And that's the same with this game. People are not going to stick around if the game is full of morons. Plenty of people have already left for that very reason. You're getting an increasing vocal minority of idiots who continue to post to the forum, and nothing is done about this stupidity. I mean, people that post threads which have been answered a million friggin' times. How many times have you seen, "I want Classic Realms, it was so much better back then, blah 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 blah," posted on the forums? How many times have you seen it? And how many times have the mods actually come down and cracked down on the people seriously for it? The best you will see is either a move to the suggestion board or a lock. That is the best you will see. And generally speaking, you won't even see a lock. They won't even go that far. People get so upset when the thread gets locked. Freedom of speech in a private domain doesn't exist. Newsflash for you, sorry. You don't have the right to say whatever you want in a private domain. And when it comes to your dumb opinions, yes, your opinions are not some kind of sacred cow that may not be harmed. They're not enshrined and protected. You have the right to state it. in a public domain. You don't have the right to say it in a private domain. Blizzard happens to have given you that right, and you should be grateful for that, because it's a privilege. Now, you do not have the right to be immune from criticism. Criticism is not a personal attack, necessarily. Sometimes it is. And the reason why is because you're an idiot. And you acted like an idiot. That's why you got burned. That's why you got insulted. It should be relatively obvious for anyone that has even the vaguest grounding in reality that if you do stupid stuff, you're going to get mocked for it. These people don't deserve protection. They're ruining the game. Literally. Every time these people are catered to, the game dies a little bit more. I troll specifically, and this is my specific motivation, to try and get rid of these people, to just try and drive them away. I don't care if I have to say nasty things about them to do it. I'm a grown-up, I can say nasty things about whoever the hell I damn please. And they have to deal with it. They can't deal with it, they whine to teacher. I don't know, this is the kind of thing you expect in a schoolyard. Now, personally, I would say to Ghostcrawler that good on you. Good on you for saying that. Good on you for going for that. Because this post is stupid. As a mage, I am embarrassed. Yeah? We were not promised help for fire in PvP and help for frost in PvE. They stated they were looking into it. They did not give a time frame or any ways whatsoever to do it. And what did we get? Nerf to mages of every type by giving a crit debuff to other classes, then cutting it in half. One thing, they didn't give you crit debuff to other classes. And two, yes, they cut it in half because it's overpowered. How do you think it's going to scale when Ulduar gear has more crit on it? It's already ridiculous. I can already get over 50% crit in Nax gear with the appropriate buffs. I mean, that's insane. You should never have crit that high, especially not on a class that is based around long casts. That's nuts. You can tell that wasn't designed for that, because ignites don't roll. The worst thing is crit, 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 oh, wasted ignites. Yes, they cut it in half because it had to be cut in half. Because if you don't cut it in half, when you have Ulduar gear, you're gonna be ludicrous. How do you properly balance in that regard? You don't. You can't. What happens when you start wearing that gear in PvP and you've got a 60-70% crit chance? That's insane. You can't balance around that. Crappy RNG disarm. As opposed to what? It was terrible to begin with, now it's slightly less terrible. Impact reworked that in balance is pretty hefty nerf. It's not a nerf at all! It's a buff! It gives you control of something that was previously random. Why is it that people seem to think that all trees have to be viable for everything? They don't! They don't have to be viable for everything. We're a DPS class, we're not a hybrid class, we don't need viable specs for everything. If we want to do Frost in PvE, then you're going to ask yourself why. We've got two other very good specs to begin with. Same with PvP. Oh, I can't do Fire in PvP. Okay, I've got Arcane and I've got Frost. I've got loads of options. So why would I care? Let's have some variety. Less homogenization, please. So yeah, blah, blah, blah. Whining, QQing. If you're going to post like that, expect to get burned. And to be honest, I'd like to see more throwing down. Because what are people going to do? Really? Cancel their subs? No, they won't. Not a chance. These people are ineffectual. They can't even vote with their feet because they don't have the testicular fortitude to do it, nor the common sense to effectively demonstrate their opinion in a way that actually makes sense and doesn't want to make you rip your own eyes out with a fork. It's atrocious. You're listening to WoW Radio. My name is TotalBiscuit and this is Blue Plz. I will be right back after this. Enjoy. You're listening to the podcast, an archive of Blue Plz. Music was removed due to copyright concerns. If you'd like to hear the music, tune in live on Fridays at 8 p.m. British Standard Time. That is 3 p.m. EST on WCRadio.com.
Death? I think we all know about death.
Yes, indeed, folks. So listen to Blue Plz here on WoW Radio with myself, TotalBiscuit. Now, for a little bit of positivity before we go into the next segment, I'd like to announce that I shall be having a fellow on the show on Friday. Yes, there will be a Friday show. So you only have to wait 3 days between now and then for more Blue Plz goodness, or badness, whichever you prefer. I'm good at both. His name is Pixel Smith. And he's been going on a tour of Europe with his friend. He's actually a journalist. And he's been visiting various guildmates. And he's been documenting his experiences. Now, I've always been a proponent of massively multiplayer gaming as a way to reach out to people in other countries and develop yourself socially, and I think this is probably one of the best examples of that. I've too have gone to other countries and other places to meet people that I knew from the internet, and it has mostly been a universally positive experience. Mostly universal, go figure. Work that one out if you can. Strain your brains. I'll be having him on the show on Friday to talk about his experiences, and I'm very much looking forward to that. So tune in Friday. I'll be interviewing Pixel Smith about his tour around Europe to meet his guildies. Shall be awesome. Now, Arcanist Belt. We have defeated Ragnaros, and you know what that means? It's time for another retrospective. This is something we've been doing over the past few weeks. Whenever we clear an instance, I do a little bit of a retrospective on it, and I decide to have a look at the instance and what we learned from it. And indeed, what Blizzard learned from it. Now, Molten Core is one of the most notorious raids in the entirety of World of Warcraft, and, like most notoriety, does not exist for very good reasons. Molten Core was not the first available raid, but it was the first available full-sized raid dungeon. First raid, of course, was UBRS, 15-man, and Onyxia, but which was, of course, Onyxia being a single boss encounter, UBRS being a small form raid. The first full-sized 40-man raid was Molten Core, and Molten Core has a very, very horrible reputation. Now, why does it have a horrible reputation? Okay, well, let me count the ways. Molten Core is a giant cave. That's boring. Molten Core has mobs that mostly look the same as every other mob. That's boring. Molten Core has like one or two unique models. That's boring. Most of the bosses look identical. That's boring. Molten Core has so much trash, it beggars belief. That's boring. Molten Core has trash that respawns every 18 minutes. Actually, it's 14, isn't it? Ancient core hounds. These things used to be a real problem. That's horrible. Molten Core has loot, which is incredibly badly itemized in almost every respect. That's bad. That's a big list. Now, it's interesting to see people look back fondly at Molten Core. And to some degree, I also look back fondly at Molten Core, but not because Molten Core was any good. It wasn't. Molten Core was really bad. And having recently beaten it in Arcanist Belt again for the umpteenth time, I can see why it was bad. Let's have a look at the mechanics of the place, to start with. The mechanics of the bosses. It is interesting to see that people thought Molten Core was challenging. At the time, it was. Why? It's not because it was hard. There's your first clue. The real reason why it was challenging is because people and players who entered Molten Core had not seen anything like what was in there. No, nothing at all. Mass curses? No. Mass magical effects that could kill you? No. Staying out of the fire? No. Living bombs? No. Debuffs that had to be cleansed? No. All this stuff. Multiple ad control fights? Absolutely not. 5-mans, and indeed even UBRS, did not properly prepare you for this place. At all. And as a result, guilds ran face first into a brick wall. Getting 40 people to raid together was challenging enough. Then running them into a place that was completely jam-packed full of trash, that didn't help matters. Not in the slightest. Oh no. Not at all. I mean, let's have a look at the first boss. First boss is Luciferon. Luciferon has 2 ads that have mind controls. Oh noes, they must be tanked and killed. His abilities are Random Shadow Bolt, and a Curse, and a Magic Effect, and that's it. Yeah, I'm not kidding. That's the kind of thing that a trash mob in TBC would have done to you. This thing was effectively a trash mob. It was barely a boss. Magmadar wasn't much better. Magmadar had a gimmick. Magmadar had an enrage that could be only removed by the use of something called Tranquilizing Shot, which was a drop-off of Lucifer, which in a massive bungle of design, bearing in mind you only got one of these per Lucifer kill, meant the first time you went into Molten Core, you couldn't get past the second boss, because you didn't have enough Tranquilizing Shots. You only had one. Seriously. What a stupid idea. What a dumb idea. Now, that entire fight basically said, oh, fears, lol. Which gave a massive advantage to any guild that had a lot of dwarf priests at the time. Now, of course, it doesn't really make a difference, because you can keep people healed regardless, and there's more ways to break out of fear than there used to be. And it was like, don't stand in the fire. Ah! Hard. Really hard. Now, the worst thing is you then go on to Gehennas, which is basically a carbon copy with a few minor changes. And most of the Flame Waker, as they were called, mobs that just look like Naga did the same kind of thing. Gehennas was like Rain of Fire, i.e. stand out of the fire. It had a curse, take it away. It had random shadow bolts, take them away. It had ads that must be tanked and killed. And that was it. Gar got a bit interesting. Oh, wait, no it didn't. It was tank ads, kill Gar. The only interesting point was that the ads would explode and would occasionally kill people unless you were careful. Hard. Geddon. What did you have with Geddon? You had AoE, stand out of the fire. Bomb, run away from the raid. Mana burn. Now, the mana burn was probably the toughest part of that. But again, it was something that could just be got rid of. It could be cleansed. It was more difficult for Horde guilds, of course, because they didn't have paladins in order to do that. They had to have priests to de-magic, and they were the only class that could do it at the time. So that was something of a pain. But it was an artificial level of difficulty as opposed to being an actually challenging fight. Shazra was probably one of the more interesting because it had one of those nasty random aggro resets, which is something that people hadn't really encountered before that. Onyxia had it to some degree, but Shazra was really bizarre in that respect. Blinked all over the place, did nasty AoEs and all of that stuff. And you moved on and you found Sulfuron Harbinger, which was effectively an enhanced version of what you've just done. Lots more dots. More magic effects to get rid of. More ads to kill in order. Golemag, same difference, except you don't kill the ads this time, you just tank them. You just blast the guy down, that's it. That is really all there is to it. Now, just FYI for those sending me messages on IRC, I'm not reading them. Seriously, why would I read them during a show? It's incredibly distracting. So don't do it. Send them at the end, or send an email. That's the best way to do it. themurloc@gmail.com. That is themurloc@gmail.com. Now, two other bosses towards the end. Major Domo. Major Domo is 8 ads. Major Domo was quite challenging just because the sheer number of ads you had to deal with and the fact that the ads couldn't be controlled in the usual ways. They couldn't be crowd controlled if you killed 4 or more of them. So that made things difficult. It was more challenging. Now, the interesting thing about Major Domo is that you couldn't get Major Domo unless you doused the runes. Now, dousing the runes is something that now recently has been taken out, and rightfully so. It was a stupid mechanic from the get-go. It involved you leveling up reputation with a particular faction which was halfway across the bloody world. Not kidding, it was in Ashara. You had to go to this remote island. Bear in mind, Ashara is pretty big to begin with. Most people didn't even have epic mounts back then. All the way over to Ashara to pick up this stuff. And multiple people had to go get it. Multiple people. It was the stupidest thing I've ever seen. They had to douse these runes in order to summon Major Domo, then beat Major Domo, of course, in order to get to Ragnaros. Ragnaros was a giant resist check. Huge resist check. And amusingly enough, when they first had him in there, the gear wasn't there. He didn't have enough gear to do it. And then, of course, Thorium Brotherhood came in, and you had to grind endless amounts of reputation and huge amounts of materials. Massive. I mean, I'm thankful right now that with Arcanist Belt we really didn't need to do that, because yes, the power grade of our characters has increased. Not really too much to say about that, to be honest. And we can survive most of it, and most of our guys are not wearing fire resistance gear. The tanks are. There's a little bit of fire res, just the kind of normal fire res you get from the fire resistance aura, etc., but that's about it. And that's okay. I survived that entire encounter wearing only an Onyxia scale cloak and the fire resistance that I got from auras. That was it. The tank was wearing full Dark Iron plate, but that was all of our stuff. That was like all of our Dark Iron, all of our cores. In fact, it was probably more than the amount of cores we got just to make one set of this stuff. Remember back when it was 40 man, you actually had to do that? It was a total nightmare. It was an artificial way of stopping people from beating the boss. It was a gear check in extremis, and not just on DPS. We're talking about having to have massive amounts of fire resistance gear, which was not readily available at the time, and required you to hit Molten Core over and over and over again in order to get it. It's horrible. Really nasty rooster block there. Now, the design of the entire instance is just massively flawed. It's not even linear, in the sense that you go down a preset path. You have to go in entirely the opposite direction to kill 2 of the bosses, and if you don't kill those bosses, you end up respawning core hounds every 14 minutes. It's like the instance was deliberately designed to annoy the hell out of you. Certainly annoys the hell out of me. And I don't think people really learned a lot, and I think that is very, very obvious for when people set foot in Blackwing Lair and got utterly screwed on the first boss. They learned nothing. I think about Razorgore versus everything in there. Think about what you could possibly learn in Molten Core. You can learn how to decurse. You should have already known that to begin with. You can learn about aggro. Okay, fair enough. Razorgore, aggro, doesn't matter. Doesn't make a blind bit of friggin' difference. Ad control. Yeah, think about ad control. Think about controlling 4 ads. Now think about controlling 100, because that's pretty much what Razorgore involves. Think about kiting. Kiting never happened in Molten Core at all. Not a single boss required any kind of kiting. The only thing I could even consider kiting would be pulling Geddon into Gar's room. Pulling Geddon into Gar's room. And even that's really not exactly kiting, is it? Shooting and running all the way through the others, or just using your pet to do it, it's pretty terrible. It's lame. It's not kiting. And yet you have to do all this stuff. The control of a NPC creature in order to do an arbitrary task, again, not part of it at all. Razorgore was a totally different world. Molten Core didn't teach you anything. You wonder why people ran slap bang into a brick wall again, wandering into Blackwing Lair. Because they learned nothing. Not a thing. They will learn way more from Zul'Gurub. Way more. Veilstraz was absolute complete pain in the same respect. Tanking orders? No. That never happened. It's just amazing that they came out with it and it was just such a brokenly horrible instance. Now, I think that there is value to be taken from Molten Core in the respect that they learned how not to do a raid encounter. There are some elements which continue to exist. Don't stand in the fire, invented in Molten Core, continues to exist this very day. You Are the Bomb continues to exist, even in Naxxramas. Grobulus is pretty much You Are the Bomb. It's the same thing. Mind controls still happen on Kel'Thuzad. Continue to happen. Been happening in many instances. It happened in Kael'thas. All sorts of things. Mind controls. A relatively challenging mechanic. So it's not to say that it wasn't a building block, but it is a shaky foundation to base your raid game on. So is Blackwing Lair. I mean, Blackwing Lair is a great instance, don't get me wrong, but you can't build your raiding on that. How are people supposed to learn? If anything, the debacle of Molten Core actually caused them to swing completely the wrong direction with Wrath of the Lich King, because they're so scared that this kind of thing will happen again. They overtuned Karazhan, which scared the hell out of people, even though most of the stuff in Karazhan is basically just advanced heroics. And people should have been able to learn there, but no, they overtuned it, which scared people, so they undertuned Wrath, because good lord, the last thing we wanted was another Molten Core disaster. And it's unfortunate that they swung a little bit too far. I think what Blizzard can learn from that is training people to do encounters is fine. Training people to raid, giving them raiding 101 is fine. But you've repeated the same mistake that Molten Core had. There was nothing else when Molten Core was out for a long time. It's the same with Naxx, there's nothing else. It's entirely the same problem, but on the other end of the spectrum. MC was too alien, you couldn't learn. And there was no other content. And Wrath's too easy. And your learning can't be applied to anything because there's no other content. People thought TBC was bad. Lord. My name is TotalBiscuit, and you're listening to Blue Plz here on WoW Radio. When we come back, it will be the Illusion of Choice, where you get to pick the last topic of the show. Email to themurloc@gmail.com. That is themurloc@gmail.com. Fear Factory coming up right now. Enjoy.
You're listening to the podcast and archive of Blue Plz. Music was removed due to copyright concerns. If you'd like to hear the music, tune in live on Fridays at 8 p.m. British Standard Time. That is 3 p.m. EST on WCRadio.com.
Let's face it, everywhere you go, you see adverts for Ventrilo server providers. With so many to choose from, how do you make the decision about which is right for you and your guild? To help you with the decision, we brought in WoW Radio's very own bleeding-edge hardcore raiders to show you which provider the world's top players trust.
Loot the stupid car hound!
No. Tank it over there. You're setting the raid on fire.
Someone pulled ads, guys!
Oh, for God's sakes! Heal the tank! Heal the tank!
Hey, guys, it's okay to DI the tank, right?
Why are you smiting and not healing?
Is that a halibut? Are you DPSing with a halibut?
Leave George alone! You'll hurt his feelings!
You named that halibut?
Guys, I think we're wiping.
What gave you that idea?
Well, we're all standing in the graveyard arguing. UGT Ventrilo servers, the only choice for the elite of the elite. Hi, I'm TotalBiscuit, the best and sexiest mage on the planet. When you're like me, you don't have downtime between raids and promotional photo shoots. That's why I use UGT Ventrilo servers. I don't have to get my hands dirty trying to fix a broken server because it was never broken to begin with. UGT servers provide crystal clear voice communication with excellent hands-on support to make sure your server is always up and running. Not only that, their prices are so low, I was able to use the extra money to buy this £32 salmon. What, you didn't think I was going to be outdone by Dustin, did you? Hey guys, want to run some BRD? Get your premium quality Ventrilo server from UGTservers.com. Be the best. Well, second best.
Yes, indeed, folks. You're listening to Blue Plz here on WoW Radio. Time for the Illusion of Choice! Yes, indeed. Now, this is an interesting little email that I've received. I say little, that would be a lie. From Jake Mayback, and he says this. He was looking at a blog called Critical QQ, whatever that might be, and it was regarding the separation of PvE and PvP. And apparently, the first segment of this blog, it was a two-parter, said that RNG is indeed good for the game, but only certain parts of it. Other places, such as resists, need to be static in order for player skills to play even the smallest part in PvP combat. And the second part, he clearly states that PvE and PvP are two different parts of the game that should be thrown as far away from each other as possible. What a spell does in PvE should be completely different to what it does in PvP. He gives an example of using the Deep Freeze ability, where it would say just do a truckload of damage in the Raiding Frost Maze's rotation. And in PvP it wouldn't do that. Now, he says, the average moron such as myself would assume that the statement is perfectly logical and makes perfect sense. Why, after all, should a person who raids 12 hours a week and doesn't even know what the acronym PvP stands for have to be bothered by class balance in arenas, affecting their performance in the weekly raids? And why should the hardcore gladiator have his abilities limited because their class was outperforming everyone else in the first person's raid? They are two completely different halves of the game. The average moron such as myself thinks ought to stay that way. How would you, and what would you say about dividing spell mechanics, damage, and effects between PvE and PvP? This one again. There was a post recently, I believe, by Ghostcrawler, and I can't find the specific post, but I can summarise what it said. That was, the reason we don't do this is because the game's complicated enough already, especially for the average player, and if you add in more elements like that, then you're going to end up with people getting utterly and totally confused. It's like, you've got a tooltip now that is pretty large, and some abilities which are not entirely clear. Now we add a second tooltip for what it does in PvP. I can see where he was coming from with that. Admittedly, to be honest, it has worked in other games. I believe Warhammer Online, as I recall, abilities do work slightly differently in PvP as they do in PvE. I don't think there's massive changes by any means. I don't think every ability's got like a PvP and a PvE element. But to be honest, I don't see the need to separate them that much. It's nice to think that they should be separated, but honestly, it's not the case. And it can never really be the case. Unless you want two completely different sets of abilities, which is a massive amount of work. It really is. Personally, I don't take the PvP game seriously. I mean, why would I? I'm a raider. I think raiding's the only challenging bit of content. If I want a PvP, I'll play a proper game. Like EVE Online. EVE Online's got better PvP, or Warhammer Online, or even better, something that actually requires skill, as opposed to MMO-style clicking and how many people you have in your particular group, like, say, Counter-Strike or Quake Live. Something that really, truly requires actual player skill, and rewards it proportionally. I find PvP to be something of an amusing minigame, but I recognise that a lot of people do get a lot of enjoyment out of it, and some people even do take the arena seriously, and as to why I really cannot imagine, but okay, different strokes for different folks. I think the Eternal Balancing Act is going to continue to happen regardless of whether or not you do this. I do get annoyed when PvP affects my PvE, but to be honest, usually it all evens out in the end. Like, mages took, like, a hefty nerf in the Arcane spec, for instance. Arcane Barrage got nerfed to make it less powerful in PvP, which directly affected the PvE rotation. Yet Arcane mages are still competitive. A lot of changes that have happened in that regard. It generally all works out. Whether or not you are uber competitive in a raid should matter less than your ability to raid. Yeah, your ability to do the job properly. Being uber DPS or uber healer is great, but if you're the guy standing in the fire, then that's not going to help you. And no amount of class balancing is going to change your ability to not stand in the fire. And that's probably about as close to bring the player, not the class, as I will get. The thing is, this has always been the case. It's always been the case that no matter how vital a class you were, or how great DPS or great healing you were, if you couldn't master the mechanics of the fight in question, then you weren't brought to the raid. This is something Blizzard, I think, seems to have missed the point on. Bring the player, not the class, has always existed. It doesn't matter if you officially endorse and move towards that policy. It's always existed. Real guilds don't take people on the basis of class, they take people on the basis of ability. But they also realise that you take the right tools for the job. You don't try and stick a square peg in a round hole. You bring a proper, varied, but precise set of tools. And then you also bring proper workmen to use those tools. You can have great workmen, lousy tools, or you can have lousy tools, great workmen. It's going to break one way or the other. They're both interdependent. So I don't see why bring the player, not the class, is now suddenly an issue, when it's been like that for years. I can't see them really separating it, to be honest. I don't think they want to split the game in two, and I would kind of agree with that, because having a cohesive world is important to an MMO. It's very important. I see the elements the elements should be optional. I see that being a good thing, absolutely. But that's as far as the divide should go. They've already tried to mix PvE and PvP with varying degrees of success, and will probably continue to do so. And as much as I would like WoW to be a purely PvE game, it isn't. And it's never going to happen, and I have to accept that. And if I want a purely PvE game, then I can go and play one. I can vote with my feet as a consumer and go and play another game. In the meantime, I've got to accept the reality of what WoW actually is, and that's a PvP/PvE game. With near enough equal emphasis put on both. And one of them is going to affect the other. Now, being a truly rounded player would, of course, involve playing both and having a good understanding of both. And personally, I don't PvP. I used to. Not anymore. I didn't find it all that entertaining. But I think you're just going to have to accept it. There isn't a lot you can do about it, really. Complaining about balance issues is very tiresome. It's been going on for a very, very long time. You have to accept that Blizzard is pretty good at it. Better than most. I mean, good lord, the imbalances in other games are insane. You've got to bear in mind that this is the same company that developed StarCraft, the most balanced RTS in the entire universe. 3 completely different factions, totally balanced to the point where South Korea has made an actual sport out of it. That's how balanced they believe it is. There's a serious money going around over there. So yeah, they can do it. But the thing is, it's a long-term process. The worst thing you can do is react to a change and say, oh, well, they changed this in PvP. It's nerfed by PvE ability somewhat. Cry, QQQ, change it now. No, they can't just change it now, because that has a knock-on effect on everything else. It's a massive interconnected web of abilities that, if you change one, everything else is affected. You can't just make knee-jerk reactions. We've seen that happen before. It causes massive breakage. Huge, horrible imbalance. It's even worse than just leaving it well alone. So yeah, the separation of PvE and PvP is a pipe dream. You might like one over the other, but just don't expect Blizzard to put a big wall in the middle and say PvPers go this side, PvEers go this side. It's just not going to happen. It's obviously not part of their design methodology. As close as you're going to get to it is Tournament Realms, really. As much as I'd like Raiding Realms that had no PvP on it, we don't have that. I trust that Blizzard will manage to find the balance. I think that Blizzard needs to look more into abilities that are solely useful in PvP. It's like Deep Freeze. Like saying, oh, well, Deep Freeze sucks, blah, 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 because of this. Impact sucks, blah, 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 because of this. No, I'm okay with that. I just think the way that the talents are set up is not conducive to speccing properly into PvP and PvE all the time. Sometimes you end up taking junk talents. Like, I've had to take junk talents for a proper Frostfire spec, and that bothers me. I think that perhaps the way that talents are designed needs to be looked at. Because if you give more flexibility with the talents that you can take, then you can just go nuts with the abilities. It's like, for instance, stuff like Frostbite. Purely a grinding / PvP ability. It's useless in raids, utterly worthless. Yet it's tier 1 talent. Now, if you split up the talent trees in such a way that allowed you to just take purely PvE stuff, then you could put plenty of PvE spells in there, abilities that could be learned via talents, and plenty of PvP, and no one would care. And if those spells had specifically strong effects on PvP, then the arena game would shift to being based around that. And then you can twiddle with them to your heart's content, and it's not going to affect PvE, and vice versa. That's probably the best thing you can do. Saying to, oh, let's change Deep Freeze is missing the point. No, there should be more stuff like Deep Freeze, but the talent trees should be arranged in such a way that you don't have to take Deep Freeze to get any further, and that there is a better, say, 51 point talent. Is Deep Freeze 51? I believe it is. That's the 5-second stun talent, isn't it? I don't spec in that crappy tree. It should be designed so that the 51 point talent is not a PvP talent, or there should be dual 51 point talents. 2 different paths on each tree. 2 different 51 point talents. You want the PvP? Take that one. You want the PvE? Take that one. Then you can balance both independently because the PvE players don't have that ability, so it doesn't affect them. And the PvP players don't have that ability, so it doesn't affect them, so they don't have to worry about it. Then you can balance around those abilities and keep your core abilities the same. It's probably the best way to do it. At least in my honest opinion. My name is TotalBiscuit, you've been listening to Blue Plz here on WoW Radio. It is time for shoutouts. So if you want to shout out, then email themurloc@gmail.com. Alternatively, send me an email on IRC. Yes, this is what you want to do. Good evening, TB. This one is from Luke Cameron Mikulski, and he says this: not sure if this remains the location to request shoutouts. It is. Or even if you do shoutouts within your show, I do. If not, then very sorry. No, you're not. I've only just recently rejoined WoW, and its community, like yourself, have been playing since release, well, actually beta. Upon joining the game, I've rejoined and listening to the show. I'm very glad to see that your unbarred rants and general anger with things are still going. Well, anger is deserved. It has still existed for all this time. Keep up the good form after all these years. If possible, give a shout out to Leek and Tamazi here in London, UK. Shout out so given to you. A shout out to Aerith from Motrex. Hurry up, girl, and level faster. Long live Titan. Well, you're a little bit late on that one. That's all I can say. ATB can have a shout out, but can you give a resounding bollocks? Okay, yeah, I can give a resounding bollocks. Yeah, there you go. You have a resounding bollocks. It's been given to you. Greetings, TB. Angrim from Nordrasil EU here. I'd like to give a big shout out to my fellow guild members, Cyrix and Celestis, from my guild post-mortem. Can I give a shout out to Loyal to NES, my very own personal Warcraft 3 World Editor Encyclopedia. Okay, there you go. A shout out to the bleep who hacked my account. That's from Nihilus. Get an encoder. I'd like to send a shout out to my guild, Conspiracy on Twisting Nether, for helping me with the last heroic glory of the Raider Meta achievement and helping me in 20-man Nax, and I hate Anathema. Speaking of Anathema, a shout out to Ariana for getting her Anathema in Molten Core last week in Arcanist Belt. That's 2 priests with benedictions for the win. Funnily enough, she actually has to use benediction because of the way that they've changed healing talents. Anathema is now a worse DPS staff than benediction. Oh, if I had a word, I wish I had some kind of drop in like Octail and Hordak to facepalm that. I mean, I suppose this will have to do. Fail. Total fail in design there from Blizzard. I'd like to give a shout out to Mr. NNJ, Seath Davlin, and all the Chill Whisper Scourge and Worm Rest Accord US. That's from Torm and Tom. A shout out to the... I'm not saying that. Good lord, Seath. A shout out to Arcanist for being the best set ever. That's from Mustachio Nut. Oh dear. Can I give a shout out to and from Dobmeister on Thunderhorn EU, to my former guildmate on Gloria Phoenix, and my newfound friends at Storm Knights. Many thanks. Let's check the email box. A shout out to Death by Trey on Proudmoore US. The blood will flow across the canteen floor. That's great. I'm going to get a shout out for Sam Thor for joining me in my Diablo 2 awesomeness. And a big shout out to the Koreans, Nerf you! Cheers from Totems at Kazakh EU. Hey, TB, it's Ice. Could you give a shout out to all the Pokemon TCG players in Memphis and St. Louis? Shout out so given. Remember to take your naps, kiddies. I'd like to give a shout out to Moment of Silence at Dalaran US for achieving Glory of the Raider last Friday. Cheers, well done, you won the RNG. A shout out to Kings and Queens Guilds on Sunstrider EU and Amnesia the Mage. I would do, but sorry, I forgot. Can I give you a big shout out to my Guild Obsidian Knights for being with me for the last 4 years? Yes, I can. That's from Delicious Mold. And a shout out to myself, Uzus, and my real life GF, ZomG, called Centane, and the Longhorns for bugging Shade of Iran by soloing him successfully. That's from Blades Edge EU. My friends, ladies and gentlemen, children of all ages, I am out of time. If you don't like my anger, then don't listen to my show. That's all I can say. If you don't like what I say on my Twitter feed, don't watch it. Shade yourself inside your little barrier of delusional reality. It's this show. Try to bring out the truth, however ugly it may be. And all I can say is, I love every minute of it. And hopefully you do too. My name's been TotalBiscuit. You've been listening to Blue Plz. Check out our other fine shows on WCRadio.com. At the moment, our podcasts are currently broken, unfortunately, but you can still download the latest shows from the front page and our shows page. We'll have all of that stuff up to date, hopefully in the next couple of days, and back and functional. If you like what we're doing, you can donate. Oh no, it's donating. You're not allowed to do that, because you use Blizzard music. Therefore, everything you do belongs to Blizzard. I think not. You may donate if you like what we do here to WoWRadioDonations@gmail.com. That is WoWRadioDonations@gmail.com. And we shall invest the money in buying new equipment and paying the server bandwidth bills, as we always do. Ladies and gentlemen, I've had a fantastic time tonight. Hopefully you have too. And I shall see you on Friday for yet another episode of Blue Plz. Be well, be happy, and if you see something you don't like, then for God's sake, shout it from the rooftops. Good night.
You have been listening to the podcast and archive of Blue Plz, a show that airs exclusively on WCRadio.com on Fridays at 8 p.m. British Standard Time. That's 3 p.m. EST. You can check out our archives on our website at WCRadio.com and subscribe to our RSS feeds. Don't forget to rate and review us using iTunes, and if you wish to leave